Vladimir Putin says, "Niet spasibo, no thank you," to the 30-day ceasefire agreement. That's Steve Witkoff, who is Trump's special envoy to the Middle East negotiator, but I guess he's now just the special negotiator because he went to Moscow, where he's seen in this video, to sit down with Russian officials and try to hammer out the beginning framework of a ceasefire agreement. Now, this 30-day ceasefire agreement that Steve put on the table. Now, Steve is the one who also put the 30-day agreements in front of Israel and Hamas, and he's been doing multiples of those that have yet to be accepted. So he's the king of 30-day agreements. He went there, talked to Putin or talked to Putin's people, and ultimately the Russians have said, we're not interested in 30 days. We want something more long-term. Now, Ukraine has accepted the 30-day agreement. They thought, okay, it's a good idea. They wanted something, they wanted what they called silence in the skies and silence at sea, which would prevent missile and bomb attacks, as well as the release of both civilian and military prisoners of war, including Ukrainian children taken to Russia. These were the things that were inside of this 30-day ceasefire framework. But it was just for 30 days. So Putin says, what's the point of that? We don't want that. We're looking for something really long-term. Now, the Ukrainians look at Putin rejecting this and they're saying, see, he's not serious. He's not serious. We knew it. He was never going to do a ceasefire agreement. But the Trump administration is more hopeful. They do believe that this is the beginnings, and they hear Putin. Putin now wants to have a meeting with Trump, and perhaps they're actually going to work something out. But the significance of this is Putin is not a pushover. That is what we're seeing here. I mean, this is not the same thing as dealing with Netanyahu, where they rely completely on U.S. money, and Hamas, who Netanyahu is committing a genocide against all of the Palestinian people. This is a completely different situation, and Putin knows it. He knows he has the upper hand, and he's not willing to negotiate a 30-day ceasefire agreement. He wants a real solid deal. The thing is, I actually agree with the Ukrainians a little bit on this, that Putin is probably not, they're saying Putin's not going to do a ceasefire agreement. He's just punting, and he's not really interested in this. And the Trump administration says, yes, no, it's okay. We think we see some promising, there's some promise here. But I actually kind of agree with the Ukrainians. What would be the point for Russia to come to some sort of an agreement? The issue for Russia specifically is NATO. That is their big issue. And what Putin has demanded in this latest round, what he said to Steve, is that he wants to demilitarize Ukraine. I mean, these are the same demands that he's made all the time. No expansion of NATO, demilitarize Ukraine. He also wants to denazify Ukraine, and he wants to keep all of the territory that he already has in Russia's control. The biggest one there, though, is, and with the territory, they could it probably would be where Russia doesn't have to give it back, but Ukraine doesn't have to actually recognize it as Russia. And it's sort of just like a silent stalemate. It's like Taiwan and China. Taiwan isn't recognized as independent from China, but Taiwan operates independently. So something maybe along those lines. That could be worked through. The issue of even demilitarizing Ukraine could be worked through. You could show that Ukraine doesn't really have the weaponry to attack Russia anymore. That could potentially happen. You could denazify. I don't know if you could really denazify. How do you eradicate an ideology? That's not that easy. But the bigger one, the biggest issue is NATO. And I don't see how they come to this. I don't see how they fix this. What would the U.S. do? So this sitting president, Trump, says, all right, we'll agree Ukraine won't be in NATO. Okay, but Trump's only president he's only president for 4 years. So then when he's gone, you get somebody else in there that's maybe like another Joe Biden, heaven forbid, but maybe somebody like that, a real warmonger, somebody in the pocket of the military industrial complex. And what do? They start expanding again. That's not actually a guarantee. Just because Trump says, all right, Ukraine won't be in NATO, where does what does that fix 4 years from now? So they're just back at it 4 years from now. I mean, that doesn't, so I don't actually see how this war ends. I'm having a hard time figuring that out. I understand how this war began. I don't see how it ends. I could be hopeful that it'll end, that we could come to some sort of agreement and stop the bloodshed. But unless the United States completely dismantles NATO, unless the United States withdraws from NATO, not only withdraws from NATO, but actually dismantles all the bases in Europe. Because, yeah, Trump could even say we're getting out of NATO. I mean, he did this his first term. He says we're out of what did he get us out of? The Paris Climate Accord. What did Biden do? Put us back in it. Trump then got us out of what was he trying to pull us out of the World Economic Forum? Biden comes along and doubles down and puts everything back in place and doubles down. So even if the United States says we're getting out of NATO, and Putin then is like, okay, great. And the United States says, and Ukraine won't ever be a part of NATO. Putin says, okay, great. We'll stop the war. 4 years from now, less than 4 years from now, you've got somebody else in there that just says, well, we're going to rejoin NATO. All of our bases are still intact. We'd not only have to get out of NATO, we'd have to dismantle the bases. I don't see any other way around that. Some sort of verbal agreement or even written agreement saying Ukraine will never be in is really still no guarantee. So the more I think about this, I understand, and we've talked ad nauseum about why this war began, and the fact that the warmongers in Washington and those who are waving the Ukrainian flag, Slava Ukraini all the time, they are blind to the fact that the United States started this war by bullying Russia and antagonizing them. We know how it began, but I looking at this, I'm not sure exactly how it ends. And that, of course, is the bigger question. And I don't have the answer to that. I would love to hear from you how you think we actually end this war. I don't think just a verbal or even written guarantee is enough when the next president can just put us back in and continue on that path. So I'm having a hard time seeing it, which makes me pretty hopeless on this. The United States can certainly, the only way that we stop it is by stopping the funds to Ukraine, just completely cutting Ukraine off, and Ukraine runs out of weapons, and then they're not able to fight back. But Europe is also supplying Ukraine with weapons. Ukraine has a stockpile of weapons. They can continue fighting for a period of time. So unless Ukraine just gets completely pummeled and taken over by Russia, I don't see how this ends. And maybe that's what Russia's waiting for. Maybe Russia is waiting for Ukraine to run out of weapons, and then it's a lot easier for Russia to march in and take over the entire territory. And when they do that, then a lot of people in the West are going to say, see, we told you, he's just trying to do it in an expansion. He's just trying to take everything. But I don't see another way. I don't see another way around it when I actually think about it. But I'd love to hear from you. You can email me, kim@kimiverson.com. Certainly join my locals and comment. And if you comment there, then I will get to your question and I'll read it out loud here on the show, your question or your comment. But I don't see a way around that. All right. Trump has threatened to take Greenland from Denmark, a NATO nation, while he sat next to Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO.
Greenland. What is your vision for the potential annexation of Greenland and getting them potentially to
Well, I think it'll happen, and I'm just thinking, I didn't give it much thought before, but I'm sitting with a man that could be very instrumental. You know, Mark, we need that for international security, not just security, international. We have a lot of our favorite players, cruising around the coast, and we have to be careful. And we'll be talking to you. It's a very appropriate, really a very appropriate question.
There's an issue in the high north, so the Arctic. So what you did, so when it comes to Greenland, yes or not joining the US, I would leave that outside for me, this discussion, because I don't want to drag NATO in that. But
right. Okay. So that's a smart answer from Mark Rutte. How do you get involved with two NATO nations? One NATO nation wants to take land from another NATO nation. What is NATO going to do about that? But here he goes trying to be a diplomat, and he's going to say, okay, but you do have a point about some things.
When it comes to the high north and the Arctic, you are totally right. The Chinese are now using these routes. We know that the Russians are rearming. We know we have a lack of icebreakers. So the fact that the outside Russia, there are 7 Arctic countries working together on this under US leadership is very important to make sure that that region, that part of the world stays safe. And we know things are changing there, and we have to be there.
Well, he just had.
So the reality of it is Trump doesn't want Greenland for national security. He's making that excuse, but it's already secure. It's under NATO. What he wants is Greenland for the natural resources, and he wants the United States to control it. And especially if the U.S. wants to get out of NATO, then he wants Greenland as part of the United States so that the U.S. can exit NATO. Now, NATO would not want to be a part of that because NATO doesn't want U.S. to exit. So why would NATO support Greenland being taken by the U.S. if it just facilitates the United States exiting NATO?
An election there the other day. Do you see a referendum, a plebiscite, where the people of Greenland would be in a position to decide if they want to become part of the United States?
Yeah, it was a good election for us, as you know. It was not a referendum. It wouldn't be called that. It was an individual election. But the person that did the best is a very good person, as far as we're concerned. And so we'll be talking about it, and it's very important.
Okay, so the election in Greenland, the independent Greenland movement really won. The whole idea of independence for Greenland. The problem with Greenland is it's not a nation that can be independent. It isn't it can't self-sustain. Denmark has to give Greenland quite a bit of money in order for it to survive. The United States wants to take on that burden. It's really interesting that Trump, who ran as an America first, let's do stuff for the working class American, is now wanting to absorb a bunch of Greenlanders who have an extremely robust social security system that they get from their social democracy state of Denmark. They get free education, free healthcare, free childcare, free elderly care. They get everything that these Scandinavian nations get. And if they come to the United States, if they join the United States, yeah, maybe the US in the beginning, just to keep things all the same for the Greenlanders, would maybe maintain those programs. But sure enough, over time, a lot of Americans might say, hey, wait a minute, why are we giving this to this group of now new foreigners that you've brought in? And we're not getting any of that. Why are you taking care of this other group of people that don't even, they don't speak our language. They're not like us. They're not from here. And now you're going to give them all these things. But a lot of people are championing it, even though America first, MAGA, but we're going to go ahead and take Greenland. And it's not going to, whether or not the United States has control over Greenland, it doesn't actually do anything for you or for me as far as our lives go. It just makes oil companies or natural resources companies incredibly wealthy.
Mark mentioned the word icebreakers. So we've ordered, we're in the process of ordering 48 icebreakers. And Canada wants to know if they could use them. I said, well, you got to pay for them. Think of it, Canada. We pay for their military. Canada pays very little for their military because they think we're going to protect them. But even with the icebreakers, so we're going to order 48. And Canada wants to be part of the deal. I say, you got to get your own icebreakers. I mean, if you're a state, you can be part of the deal. But if you're a separate country, you've got to get your own icebreakers.
He'll get further into Canada again a little later in this. He's, I think, serious about taking Canada as a state.
Russia, as you know, has about 40 of them. And we have one big icebreaker. But that whole area is becoming very important. And for a lot of reasons, the routes are very direct to Asia, to Russia, and you have ships all over the place, and we have to have protection. So we're going to have to make a deal on that, and Denmark is not able to do that. Denmark's very far away and really has nothing to do. What happens, a boat landed there 200 years ago or something, and they say they have rights to it. I don't know if that's true. I don't think it is, actually. But we've been
How do you think this country was founded? A boat showed
dealing
up.
with Denmark, we've been dealing with Greenland, and we have to do it. We really need it for national security. I think that's why NATO might have to get involved in a way, because we really need Greenland for national security. It's very important. We have a couple of bases on Greenland already, and we have quite a few soldiers, and maybe you'll see more and more soldiers go there. I don't know. What do you think about that, Pete?
Wow. Okay. So he's threatening military action against Denmark, a NATO nation. This is an interesting strategy. If Trump really wants out of NATO, this would be the way to do it. I mean, this would shatter NATO's credibility entirely. If one NATO nation attacks another, then what was the point of NATO? Here you've got and it would show something to Europe. I mean, there they are. They all joined together with the United States for protection to protect them from the big bad Soviets. And yet the real big baddies who are actually going to take land are the Americans, the ones they allied with. I mean, imagine that. The USSR hasn't expanded into Europe, taken more territory. No, but the United States is now threatening, and these NATO nations are thinking, what in the world were we doing actually banding together with the bully that's actually going to take more land than Russia could ever dream of?
Don't answer that, Pete. Don't answer that question. But we have bases, and we have quite a few soldiers in Greenland. As a state, it would be one of the...
Okay, so now he's going to move on to talking about Canada as a state. The fact that he's brought this up numerous times and continues to talk about it with a straight face not with a joke in his, no joking smile, no wink. This guy is saying these things with a straight face. Makes me think he's serious. But the implications of taking Canada as a state are extremely, though that's serious, especially for those who voted for him. People complain about all these illegals who are going to be coming up through the border, and Democrats are trying to bring them in so that they could get the voters. And Trump is going to legally bring in the state of Canada into the United States, which has as many people as California, a second California, all of them voting liberal. None of them would ever vote for Donald Trump or any Republican. They would all vote Democrat every single time. That would solidify Democratic control over this country for decades upon decades. And yet, I think he's serious.
Great states anyway. This would be the most incredible country visually. If you look at a map, they drew an artificial line right through it between Canada and the U.S., just a straight artificial line. Somebody did it a long time ago, many, many decades ago, and makes no sense.
I don't think he realizes that Canada has its own makeup of states. So you wouldn't make Canada one giant state. You would have a bunch of different states that are added to the United States. Canada has provinces. I know they're not called states, but Trump, they are governed very similarly to states. That's way too big of a country to turn into one state and have it governed by one governor.
It's so perfect as a great and cherished state. Keeping "O Canada," the national anthem. I love it. I think it's great. Keep it. But it'll be for the state, one of our greatest states. Maybe our greatest state. But why should we subsidize another country for $200 billion? It costs us $200 billion a year. And again, we don't need their lumber. We don't need their energy. We have more than they do. We don't need anything. We don't need their cars. I'd much rather make the cars here. And there's not a thing that we need. Now, there'll be a little disruption, but it won't be very long. But they need us. We really don't need them. And we have to do this. I'm sorry. We have to do this. Yes.
Mr. President.
Yeah.
We have to do this. I mean, is he saying we have to do this by making them a state? There's no way this is going to happen. But the fact that he keeps saying it over and over again, is this some sort of negotiation tactic, or is he actually dead serious? Are we going to become the 60 states of the United States rather than 50? Canada has 10 provinces. So we're going to add those 10 provinces, or is he just going to say, no, one big state of Canada? That way they only get 2 senators. So that's maybe better, right? That you keep their limited on the senators. Yes, the House expands. Yeah, they get to vote, but it's only the electoral college votes. We can keep them small. And maybe he's thinking it won't be that big of a deal. I mean, this is just absurd. The fact that he keeps saying this over and over again, I don't know. Maybe he actually means it. What do you think? I would love to hear from you. Join my locals. Add a comment there. The link is down below. But do you think Trump is he serious about making Canada a state? Really? Hospitals and schools are on high alert. Health officials are pushing fear again because of the measles, and talks of mandates are creeping back. But real protection doesn't come from government orders. It starts with you. Here's what they don't tell you. A strong immune system is the best defense. That's why the wellness company's elderberry gummies are packed with antioxidants, vitamin C, and zinc to help keep your little ones healthy and resilient. But if pneumonia or an ear infection occurs, being prepared is everything. The kids' medical kit comes stocked with chewable amoxicillin and 5 other essential medications, so you're not scrambling if things take a turn. And for adults, Dr. Peter McCullough recommends the Wellness Company's Natural Immunity Blend to keep the immune system ready for battle. So if a more serious complication arises, the Medical Emergency Kit provides critical medications for early intervention. Make long, expensive hospital waits a last resort. Don't get caught off guard. All it takes is filling out a digital intake form, and within 1 to 2 weeks, your kit arrives at your door. Get prepared now by heading to twc.health/Kim. Use code Kim to save up to $45 off, plus get free shipping. Again, that is twc.health/Kim. Code Kim to get $45 off, plus free shipping. Kits are only available to U.S. residents. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iversen Show, which has a new showtime. Catch the full Kim Iversen Show, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. Head to KimIversonShow.com. See you there.